Hi, folks. Today we're talking with actor Joe Dinicol. He's one of the stars of the new comedy Banksters, which is available on DVD Tuesday, March 10th from Arc Entertainment. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, Banksters for me was very reminiscent of the raunchy and unpolitically correct movies from the 1980s. Films like Porky's, Up the Creek, Screwballs, to name but a few. And these movies weren't afraid to put all sorts of humor into them, raunchy or otherwise, and Banksters seemed to follow in those footsteps. I found it hilarious that a movie of that magnitude could actually be made in today's politically correct environment. So what was it about the script that attracted you to the project?
Well, I mean, like anything for actors who are not famous, you go to the things that want you as much as you want them, which, at my stage, there's certainly stuff that I'm not interested in, but for the most part, I'm looking to work. And this was something that came up that was, I thought, really funny. Also something that I love, which is sort of a buddy comedy, which, is sort of, is one of my favorite things. And I got the script, and I loved it, and I auditioned. For most actors, you take a part because you got the part,
Right.
And hopefully on things like this, you get it, and it's something that you kind of love and enjoy doing, and it becomes a lot of fun. And this happened to be one of those things that, I got that they liked me, and I was thrilled because I don't usually get to play characters, certainly as sort of brassy and ballsy and I usually thrive in playing the not so confident guy. So it's really fun to play the kind of overly pardon my
overly
language, and kind of character.
Right.
So it was a real thrill to get to do that, and to do it with a cast that Michael Cedar, who I had known and have since become very close with on that movie, and Brandon Furla, who's amazing, and Grace and Laura and Alan Thicke, and to bring together a cool group of people to do something like you said that is kind of a bit raunchier and also hopefully pretty smart, and it was a thrill.
Right, sure, terrific. Well, the movie storyline for me was evocative of two of my favorite movies from the 80s, The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox and Working Girl with Harrison Ford and Melanie Griffith. And in both films, you have the underdog, Michael J. Fox and Melanie Griffith, who start out not knowing much of anything about the business they're getting into, but they're passionate and determined. And as the film progresses, they find their footing and eventually topple the bad guys over and win the day. Was that one of the elements about the movie that you could appreciate and relate to?
Absolutely. I mean, I love Secret of My Success. That's a great pull, actually. A great comparison. Yeah, and I'm the same, man. I love those, the movies from the 80s. In fact, we did a whole photo shoot where Michael Cedar and I, all we wanted to do was recreate the License to Drive poster. We were very aware of that kind of tone of high stakes and big plot, as it's really fun to work on the subtler, more sort of humanistic stories for sure, but to do that kind of high stakes hijinks and like you said, toppling the bad guy type fare is I think reminiscent of that time, and I kind of miss movies like that, The Secret of My Success, Back to the Future, and basically anything with Michael J. Fox in it.
I agree.
But those movies that have high goals in terms of plot, and they pull them off, bringing down a bad business guy, like it's all sort of, it's these broad plot things that I agree, I think are so much fun and are very cathartic for audiences. Exactly.
And in the film, like you said, you and Michael Cedar, you play best friends, and you've been friends since you were kids. And as an indie filmmaker myself, I'm always analyzing actors' performances in every movie I watch. And I thought the friendship you both portrayed was very believable and authentic. And I'm just wondering, did you guys have to work hard on that aspect, or did it just come naturally?
Well, it's funny. It's one of the few times I knew Michael. I was on his TV show, Life with Derek, years prior, but we didn't really cross paths much. And we've kind of we did a commercial together when we were very young. We sort of crossed paths over the years, but never run really in the same circle. And this was one of those things, I think, where we were both thrilled to be doing it. And you look at that script, and that's sort of everything. Everything after that, if people buy that we're friends, if we buy that we're friends, we can go on this journey together, and it makes everything so much easier. So I think, we were weirdly sort of cognizant when we got to prep the movie. We both kind of just decided to be best friends. We were just like, look, let's just be great friends. And then we were. We had the greatest time making the movie, but it was a weirdly deliberate decision to just be like, what are we going to pretend all day? Why don't we just be really good friends? Then it'll translate. And we sort of willed it into being. Now, that worked because he's a great guy, and we do get along swimmingly, but there was this sort of weird decision we both made where we're like, we should just be best friends for the next week. Like, let's just do that. It'll make this easy. So we just sort of decided to really enjoy each other, and it was a thing we both sort of came to separately and then together, and so it made that part of it so much easier and so much fun. The biggest thing I think that people can pick up on is when people are drawn to performances where people feel like they're having fun. I think. That they really care, and when it's friends, you want to feel like they enjoy their friendships. People enjoy their friendships,
right?
And so I think if you can make that palpable, then you've won half the battle. Then people will follow you through whatever hijinks you're going to take them on.
That's right, and I agree with you. I've seen so many movies where these two characters are supposed to be best friends or lovers or know each other so well, and half the time you look at them and you're like, I don't buy it for 1 second,
Yeah. Well, it's why we love Swingers. Like, Swingers is a great example of Vince Vaughn's character can, on the page might come off as kind of potentially irritating or too brash, but they care about each other so much in that movie that you sort of forgive him and you find him charming because he really cares about Favreau's character, and it sort of makes the movie for me their palpable friendship.
Right, exactly. And then you and your in all of the throughout the whole movie, you guys pretty much seem to get on well with each other, and your other co-stars like Grace Lynn Kung, you and her became a couple in the movie, and you got to share some, of course, raunchy scenes. How was it filming those? Was it uncomfortable or was it just fun?
It's funny, like those scenes, whether it's like a tender love scene or even a kiss, it's a weird thing because it's choreography, right?
Right.
But we have these connotations on these things because they're intimate things we do. So I think it's always there's always an awkward moment. Most actors who are professionals have, at this point, everyone has sort of that awkward moment. And we go, okay, what are we doing here? I put my hand here. You're going to kiss me on the neck, and then we're going to give you, you kind of, you get down to business. And with someone as awesome as Grace, you end up, you have, you make sort of fun of yourselves. You make it as sort of comfortable as possible. And then you try and serve the scene. You go, well, what's funniest? Like, you hit me. That's hilarious.
Right.
You're trying to sex and certainly sex, like the stuff that her and I do in the movie, is for a purpose, right? It's either to drive plot, or it's to make people laugh, or it's to make people feel uncomfortable. Whatever, there's a purpose for it. So you got to look at what the purpose of that is. And for us, it was I think twofold: to be kind of like dangerously sexy, and also to be ridiculous and hilarious.
Right.
And so knowing that, you kind of both go in. You go, okay, well, what's the farthest we can go? What's the best gag here? Like, I want to look the most submissive and terrified. She wants to look, you kind of figure out and then you're working on a scene, right? And then you're back to a scene.
Well, what I liked about it as well was the fact that it started out and she's slapping you in the face and she's knocking you around, but as the movie progresses, it becomes more tender. It kind of moves away from that.
Well, that's the nice swing, right? Where you if you want to start in one place and then swing to the other, and that's a really fun thing for an audience to sort of go on that journey with you. It's fun to see a guy like Isaac go from being this overly confident sort of guy to seeing that, you know, maybe he's not very confident with women. Maybe he likes that she's kind of tender with him and lets him be vulnerable. Like, that's a really nice thing to see in a character that you haven't seen that in yet.
Right. Yeah, you go from rough to soft, and I like that, like you said, the swing on that. And one of your other co-stars, Alan Thicke, plays one of the main antagonists in the movie, and his career in the industry spans over 4 decades. What was it like working with him, and did he have any words of wisdom for you?
I don't know about words of wisdom. The guy, you know, Alan was great, and he brings such a great weight to it. You know, when you think of like a boss, a very, you know, talk about father figure,
right?
You know, he carries that weight without doing anything, and so he, you know, having someone like him in the movie just from the word go gives it a certain, you know, gives him a status that you know, if you don't that kind of celebrity and that kind of familiarity with someone like that, it helps out a lot.
Right.
And then he's just a good actor. And in terms of advice, you know, it can be a very like dangerous thing, I think, to start imparting advice on people. And I think, you know, he was very complimentary of both Michael and I. He was very good to us and kind of let us do what we were doing and sort of hopped on our train because we were sort of there all the time,
right,
trying to steer this ship. And he, you know, he's such a professional. He knew, you know, that I think he knew that we knew what we were doing and kind of and sort of hopped on board with us. But
right,
he was just a wonderful presence to have around, you know.
Well, one of the first feature films you did back in 1999 was Sofia Coppola's feature film directorial debut, The Virgin Suicides.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? I mean, you're working with the daughter of one of America's most acclaimed directors and an all-star cast, Kirsten Dunst, Josh Hartnett, James Woods. I mean, what was that experience like for you?
I think it was probably much different than most people's experience on that movie. I had a very fairly brief experience. I'm not in the movie very much.
Right.
I have, I think, 2 scenes or something.
Yeah.
I was auditioning for another part, and she pulled me aside. She was like, "You're Italian?" And I said, "Yeah," sort of distantly. And she was like, "Do you know what strutting is? Can you strut?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have seen Saturday Night Fever. I can strut." She's like, "Can you do an Italian accent?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, I think so." You know, the first rule of auditioning is if they ask you if you can do something, just say yes.
Say yes, exactly.
And so she said, "Just step to the middle of the room, say I love her in an Italian accent, and then keep walking." So I did that. Say I love her, an Italian accent, and then I just strutted right out of the room. And she came out and she was like, "Do you want to be in my movie?" And I said, "Yeah, great." And now I was like, you know, I was 13 or something. I read maybe the first half of that script, didn't get it really.
Right.
And also, I'm sort of one of the only moments of levity in that whole movie.
Right, right.
I play the guy who's in love. The youngest Lisbon daughter is in love with me, and I'm in love with this other girl. And to prove my love, I jump off a balcony. But I don't. But it's like a first-story balcony, so I just fall in some bushes and then keep walking. That's basically the extent of my part. And it's weird, and it's funny, and it's like the only funny moment, kind of, in that
in the movie, right?
Dark movie. So I had no, you know, that movie comes up for me all the time. And it's so funny because I have no real, you know, I was there for I think 3 days maybe. I have no real connection to what the rest of that movie is, other than as a fan and having watched it.
Right.
So it's funny when people are like, "Oh, you were in the Virgin Suicides," and I'm always kind of like, "Yeah, I suppose so." I mean, I'm in my own weird part of that movie that you know, I'm not stopping suicides. I'm not, you know. So yeah, it was certainly cool, and she was, you know, her and her brother Roman, who directed the second unit, were both really lovely to me for the brief time I was there, and very kind to everyone. We shot it in Toronto, and everyone, I think, had a really good time on that movie.
Right. Well, then a few years later, you appeared in George A. Romero's Diary of the Dead, and of course, anybody who loves horror movies knows that he's synonymous with zombies, and many people say he was the inventor of that genre. Was that, I mean, a horror movie something you liked when you got to work with them? Was it exciting? You know, was it something you were looking forward to? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I was never a big zombie movie. I love horror movies, but I was never, before that I was not a huge zombie movie guy specifically. Yeah. But yeah, that was a really cool experience. You know, we shot it because we shot it with sort of first-person narrative, like the camera was a character, so we all interacted with the camera, and so everything was done sort of handheld. It was all very loose in terms of, you know, there wasn't like a lot of, now we do a setup here, and then we do the reverse. It was all like someone was shooting it with a video camera. So it was a really cool, you know, you don't often get to act in things like that are that, you know, unstructured.
Right.
And then, you know, working with him, he's just, you know, that's his world. And you're right, he did invent that genre. He really did. And so for him, like, there's no second guessing the genre because it's his. So, you know, he's kind of like very much at peace with anything that he puts on paper or puts in front of the camera because that's his world. No one can really question it. So it was he's a very sweet man, a very intelligent man, and a very easy man to work with because you know, he's in his element, and he's just an insanely sweet guy. So yeah, and that was, you know, that was a really good group of people. I met one of my best friends on that movie, and you know, it was a really cool time.
Right, terrific. Well, then after the success of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, Edgar Wright went on to do Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and you appeared in that. Now, Shaun of the Dead obviously was Wright's homage to Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and both he and Simon Pegg appeared in Romero's Land of the Dead. Did you and Edgar Wright ever have a chat about the fact that you both worked with him?
You know, I didn't. I was only on that movie for one day. I think I auditioned for every part in that movie and was just kind of not right for it. And that movie shot for a long time. And about a year, like almost a year later, I just got offered this. They just offered me this part. They were like, they need, you know, they wanted to give you something, and so I went and I spent the day with Edgar Wright. It was a pretty slow day with Edgar and Michael Cera. And he's one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. I think he was really sweet to me, and I spent a really lovely day with him. I didn't really talk about Romero. I didn't remember that he was in Land of the Dead. We talked a lot about Toronto because he was making a movie that Scott Pilgrim, the comic book, is all set in Toronto, and he was very concerned about making Toronto look cool, not feel forced about it. He had hired, you know, Broken Social Scene, who a couple of them are buddies of mine. Like he was, and when I saw him at the premiere, he was like, "So does Toronto look good? Like, how does it?" He sort of seemed to confided in me a little that he was very concerned about making sure Toronto looked great in the movie, which I thought it was phenomenal.
You don't get that very much.
No, you don't, and he did it. He did it really well, and so yeah. I mean, like I said, I just said the one day, but he's a class act, that guy.
Well, is there much of a difference for you as an actor if you're working, say, on a bigger budget movie like Scott Pilgrim, as opposed to an indie film like Banks's? I mean, do you find you have more or maybe less creative control over your character development depending on the project you're working on?
I think I don't have a lot of experience on big budget movies. Even, you know, Scott Pilgrim, like I said, I was there for a day and didn't have much of a character, so to speak. I mean, most of my experiences with smaller budget stuff, you know, I think it's twofold. I think with more money, you have more cooks in the kitchen. You have to, you know, decisions have to be approved by more people. That being said, you also have a lot more time to explore things. You know, I've done films, you know, the one or two bigger budget films I've done, you know, you're shooting maybe 2 pages a day, which is nothing. You know? Right, exactly. I've been on TV shows where we shoot 15 pages. So it's, you know, you have a lot more time to really get into the DNA of a scene and a character, and so in that way it can be a little more liberating. On a sort of a run and gun movie like Banks's, which we shot for 3 weeks and we shot 6 days a week,
Right.
By week 3, you're running on fumes, but there's something exhilarating about that pace of having to get your 10, 15 pages a day, or 5 to 10 pages a day, working long days, long weeks. You bond with everyone. There's no pretension. There's no like fancy, huge dressing rooms off-site. It's a real bonding experience, and so that I kind of love that creative environment, where not everyone is segregated, or things take a movie takes like a year to make, 6 months to a year. Some of these big budget movies.
Oh yeah,
you're entirely different people by the end of it.
That's right.
When you shoot something, Banks's was one of those things where we all went up to North Bay, Ontario, and we just were like, okay, we're a family for 3 weeks. We're all each other has. And then you go home at the end of it, but you get this sort of time capsule piece that is very charged and sort of intense.
Right. Well, like yourself, I've been doing movies as an indie filmmaker for 30 years, and like you said, when you're doing low budget and independent, you kind of bond with the people you're working with. And I always find it a little bit sad when you wrap on your final day, because you've all been in that environment together. And you kind of share the ups and the downs, and by the time it's over, you're like, I don't want this to end. Let's do something else, Let's write more, But
and I think that's why I love the movies of Wes Anderson. I love people who work with a company of actors, because I think what you get in those scenarios is real chemistry between people, which if you find it is something you should. I come from a theater background. In the theater, you capitalize on chemistry. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a good duo when you're young, at some point you're going to do Waiting for Godot together. Like, that's just, because they're that sort of chemistry, whether it be a Romeo and Juliet or what have you, that, you want to capitalize on people who work well together. And so a company of actors who plays off each other, that's what you take on to the next thing. The project's over, but I would love to do another movie with Michael Cedar, because I just had a ball with him.
Right, and like you said, I've worked with the same kind of actors over, and you kind of get to know their workings, what makes them tick and what makes them work, and half the time I don't even audition them because I know what they're capable of.
Right.
Like, you've done a lot of stage work, Antony and Cleopatra, and Waiting for Godot, and Richard III. Is theater a love of yours? I mean, is that something you love doing more than film, or is it just, do they balance each other out, in other words?
I think they balance each other out. I mean, I unfortunately I haven't been on stage in about 2 years, because I have been lucky to have been fairly busy with film and TV. But I started a theater company with a good friend of mine about 10 years ago. I'm not very involved anymore, but it was the kind of thing that when we were, when I was having slower times or not being as creative, it was a great outlet to make sure that I was doing it, that I was acting, that I wasn't just sitting around. Certainly career-wise, I focus more on film and TV. I really like that craft, but I will always, I think if you grow up with the theater, you'll never not do it, or at least you shouldn't not do it, if that makes sense. I think it's a charge that it's being in front of a crowd and getting the actual response to what you're doing is it's like I don't know, it's like nothing else. I love the minutiae and the finite nature of the film and TV craft, and there's sort of a maturity and a patience to getting good at that.
Right.
But being able to perform, I think, is what we're doing. I think it's important to remember that on some level we are performing, that we're like, I think the danger with film and TV acting is it can become quite indulgent and about the person, as opposed to remembering that all this stuff is in service of telling a story to an audience. And that's ultimately what we're doing is, and when you're on stage, you can't hide from that. You can't hide from the fact that you've got to convey, like, whether you're having a real emotional moment doesn't really matter unless it's affecting the audience.
Right, exactly.
It's a good tool to get actors out of their own way and out of their own head, because you can feel when something's not landing on stage. You can't feel that on a movie set. It's very easy to be self-indulgent.
I agree.
I think theater is very, aside from just loving doing it because it's such a thrill, I think it can be very important to remind you that we're servicing a story and characters for for someone to sit down and watch and enjoy.
And when you're on stage as well, you got that. I did a little bit of stage back in Ireland years ago. You have that adrenaline and a little bit of fear because you've only got one shot. It's not like film where you can do it over and over. So that adrenaline kind of, before you go on stage, you're nervous, and then once you get on there and you hear the audience and they're interacting, you kind of get into it. And you're like, oh, this is great. I love this.
Yeah.
All right, we've been talking with Joe Dinicol, one of the stars of the new comedy Banksters, which is released on DVD next Tuesday, March 10th from ARC Entertainment. Joe, thanks so much for your time, and best of luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, man. You too.
All right, thank you.